that says, okay, so I'm carried, I'm overwhelmed so many times. But in some moments I can stop and stand steady and be clear and be connected. And notice what it's like when we do that. Because in the moments, and there will have been, even if it might feel like only a few in midst of all the activity of one's mind and heart and body this morning, there will have been moments where you're connected. And if in those moments you can let yourself really experience it rather than worry about how many moments you weren't connected or present in, which is the habit of the mind, don't worry about that. It doesn't matter. There's a saying in India that goes, the light of a single candle will dispel 1,000 years of darkness. It doesn't matter how long the unconsciousness happened for. What matters is that we're awake again in the moment of noticing. And in that, to notice what it's like. In that moment, we are not in the stream of unconsciousness. And we're beginning to establish a stream that runs counter to it. We're supporting and deepening the establishment of a new stream that is alive. The stream of unconsciousness is not alive. It's powerful, but it really is simply the reenactment of past, of history, of something that's gone. So, this is what we're doing, in a very simple way, undertaking the greatest journey of our lives, which is the journey of returning to where we are, and choosing to not abandon that place so far as we're able, being interested to see what it has to offer us. So let's take some time for some more walking meditation. And in the walking, notice how there's a certain momentum when you walk. It's one of the great values of it. We start to go somewhere, and then we stop, and we turn around and come back. And ultimately, we're going nowhere. But the illusion is that we're going somewhere because we're keeping moving. That might be a little frustrating to begin with, but ultimately it's a great relief to allow ourselves to be in movement, but going nowhere. And seeing what it's like to be present in this. Noticing if the momentum of mind carries you away. That's okay. Notice it and come back. See what it's like to just land. To take a step, to stand still. If you feel you're getting lost or carried or pulled, and sometimes it can feel really strong, a sense of, oh, this is pointless, why am I doing this? Just stop and stand still. Take a few moments to really be where you are, and then begin walking again. Give yourself time for this to soak more deeply into you. Don't expect it all to happen at once. Do you notice how, despite it seems our own busyness and inner momentum, we can also start to sense and feel a quietening, a stilling, a steadying of heart and mind? The feeling in the room for the previous 10-15 minutes of sitting seemed to me quite different than the first 10 or 15 minutes we all sat down here together. It's true that there's a real momentum in the busyness and reactivity of our mind. But there is also a very gentle but steady, you could say, gravitational pull that's different and that really calls us and draws us back into a deepening connection with our life and our experience. And it's something that we can support, and we do support through this practice. It's not like we make it happen, but we support the conditions that allow it to happen. And we learn to not support that which undermines it. So as we pay attention to our experience and framing it again in this context of going against the stream, we can see that what's taking place within us, the momentum, is not random. Of course, there's plenty of random, or apparently random, events within it. But there's a sense of themes or particular agendas or urges that we start to encounter, that we can begin to recognize. That although there's a certain universality in that sense of the momentum of busyness and reactivity, for each of us it's very particular and it's individual as to what it is that pulls us or pushes us and how we are conditioned by that. So basically what that's saying is that we need to understand the particulars of what it is that goes on within us. This is one of what we call an aspect of what we call self-knowledge, where we come to see what it is that's moving, what it is that we could call the buttons that get pushed, and what it is that pushes them. This is something we need to know about, because if we don't, then we experience ourselves as just randomly reacting to random experience and not quite knowing what's going on. So we can notice, if we pay attention, that certain things start to come back again and again. And observing the mind, to begin with, the first time it's like, my gosh, it's like when someone just invented the radio, and it's like, wow, would you look at all this going on? We might not like all of it, but to begin with it seems like amazing. Look at all this, programming, shall we say, being aired in our mind. After we spend a bit of time listening, and perhaps we're listening to, I don't know, Radio 1 or something, we start to realise, I actually don't know if Radio 1 is the right one, I've never listened to it, but whatever's playing pop music locally, we start to see that, and not just pop music, but mostly the radios tend to play a lot of the same things again and again, at least the music stations. And when we see our mind, it does much the same thing. It tends to follow similar tracks. It tends to have certain grooves that it flows down. And as one student reported early in their meditation practice, I've had this great insight. He said, my mind is a jukebox. Just spinning these same old tracks. And of course, we've all got our own top 10. It doesn't mean we necessarily like them, but we seem to play them a lot. So as we're more able to be present and connected and see this momentum, we start to become interested in, well, what's going on in that? Not out of a judgmental or reactive attitude to it that says it shouldn't be this way, but out of recognizing there's something limiting in it. There's something that feels bound or unfree, and out of a sense of potential for freedom. We might say, well, what's going on here? And we do this not by trying to figure it out, because that's more of the stuff going on, isn't it? But by watching to see. Scientific observation doesn't try and make a theory about what's happening. It watches what's happening until the theory starts to come out of that. And then you do the experiments to test your theory. But mostly we jump into having a theory and trying to make the thing fit into it. So here it's like, slow down. Don't do that so quickly. Just watch and see. And what we'll notice is that there's particular ways in which we get hooked. Each of us, all of us, we have them. It might be different for you than for me, but we have them. And it's good to be able to see that with a degree of humility and humour. It's like, yeah, this is what happens. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama is, I think, a great exemplar of both those qualities in this regard, and many others, in fact. And I remember hearing of a story he told.